Now, Drake thinks that Kendrick Lamar actually cheated during their beef. I'm sure you might have heard a thing or two about this particular topic, because it's everywhere right now. I want to talk about this recent story involving Drake, Kendrick Lamar, and the biggest record label on the planet, UMG, a giant that both Kendrick Lamar and Drake are in bed with, which is why this entire story is so interesting. And there's a few angles that I want to talk about in regards to this. Before we get to that, let's break down what's actually going on. So Drake on November 25th, which was 2 days ago, initiated legal action against Universal Music Group, mostly recognized as UMG, and Spotify. Now the reasoning for that? Well, according to the lawsuit, which isn't technically a lawsuit, it's a pre-action petition which can lead to a lawsuit. Drake is accusing UMG and Spotify of artificially inflating the streaming numbers for Kendrick Lamar's diss track Not Like Us, which as we all know was the highlight of the beef between Kendrick and Drake. This record alone overshadowed everything that happened in this feud, but not only that, it was one of the biggest moments in hip-hop history in the last few decades, which is very monumental. Not Like Us is one of the fastest growing rap songs in hip-hop history on top of that. Now Drake is now taking legal action, essentially because he believes that UMG and Spotify engaged in unethical practices to artificially boost the popularity of Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar. Now what does this mean? Well, according to Drake's legal team, they're alleging that bots were used to inflate the streaming numbers of the song, making it seem way more popular than it actually was. They're also claiming that undisclosed payments, essentially pay-for-play schemes, in other words, payola, were made to ensure the song dominated not only streaming platforms, but also traditional airplay like on radio stations. But it doesn't stop there. The petition also alleges that UMG cut a deal with Spotify, offering them 30% lower licensing fees for Not Like Us. In exchange, Spotify supposedly recommended the track to users searching for completely unrelated artists and songs. Basically, they're saying Spotify was pushing Kendrick's diss track into people's playlists, whether they were looking for it or not. And if that wasn't enough, UMG is also accused of using third-party companies to use bots to inflate the streams of Not Like Us even further. So according to this filing, Kendrick's song wasn't just breaking records. It might have had some fraudulent help along the way. On top of that, they also claim UMG paid influencers to boost the song on social media, which isn't illegal, and hired armies of bots to fraudulently spike the numbers, and that's of course illegal. In one particularly wild claim, Drake's team alleges that UMG went as far as paying Apple to have Siri, the voice assistant, purposely misdirect users to Kendrick's Not Like Us instead of Drake's album Certified Lover Boy. According to this filing, when users asked Siri to play Certified Lover Boy, the system instead played Not Like Us. Now, why would UMG go all in on promoting Kendrick's song like this? Well, according to Drake's legal team, they think it comes down to money and internal politics. They claim that UMG and its division Interscope, which is the record label Kendrick is signed to, have financial incentives tied to individual label performance rather than the overall success of Universal Music Group. Basically, they're saying executives at Interscope are motivated to push Kendrick's track because it helped their department and their own pockets more than anyone else's. The particular accusations aside for a second, this is a valid perspective because a record label that's as big as Universal is in a lot of ways disconnected from the big picture, because each individual label imprint within the label themselves consists of different teams, different A&Rs, different marketing departments, artists, producers, managers, etc. So things can in a lot of ways become very individualistic the more you analyze it. Now, as far as what I said earlier, Drake's team says UMG was also trying to give Kendrick's entire catalog a boost by making the song go viral, all to maximize profits for Interscope. Apparently Drake, who's signed to Republic Records through UMG, tried to resolve the situation with UMG directly, but they had no interest in taking responsibility. Instead, they allegedly tried to cover their tracks by firing employees who were seen as being loyal to Drake. Drake's attorneys are also saying that UMG actively deflected blame, pointing fingers at Kendrick and insisting that Drake should sue Kendrick instead of them. And UMG actually told Drake that they'd sue Kendrick themselves if Drake ended up filing that lawsuit against them. The petition says that UMG didn't rely on chance to make the song go big or even standard marketing practices to help Kendrick break through the noise on Spotify. Instead, Drake's team is calling this a full-blown scheme, alleged racketeering, deceptive business practices, and false advertising. And like I said earlier, let's keep in mind that this isn't a lawsuit like a lot of people claim. What Drake's team is doing here is asking the court to order Spotify and UMG to preserve documents related to these claims before taking any further legal action. Think of it as step one in building a bigger case. Now, what's at stake for Drake here? Well, the petition claims he suffered economic harm because UMG saturated the market with Not Like Us at the expense of other artists like Drake himself. And UMG wasn't gonna stay silent on this one. A spokesperson for Universal Music Group responded to these claims, and let's just say they're not holding back. They told Business Insider, and I quote, "The suggestion that UMG would do anything to undermine any of its artists is offensive and untrue. No amount of contrived and absurd legal arguments in this pre-action submission can mask the fact that fans choose the music they want to hear." In other words, they're completely denying the accusations and saying that the success of Kendrick's track was purely fan-driven. No bots, no shady deals, just people choosing what they wanted to listen to. As for Kendrick and Drake, their teams haven't responded to requests for comment, and Spotify, they've declined to comment altogether, leaving this whole situation with more questions than answers. Now, this is major because if Drake's claims hold up, it doesn't just impact him. It could shake up the entire music industry. Streaming numbers and chart positions are a massive part of how success is measured today. If platforms like Spotify and labels like UMG are manipulating the system, it raises the question about how authentic those numbers really are. That's one aspect of it, but an even bigger aspect, which I think is more important to emphasize, is what is Drake actually trying to accomplish here? I think the agenda of this move should be questioned because Drake isn't going to do anything that doesn't benefit himself, and the same goes for Kendrick, obviously. Personally, this is what I have to say. I don't think Kendrick would ever allow anyone to put him in a position where his success becomes artificial or dependent on shady tactics. And I don't want to make this about Kendrick's character because I don't really know the man personally. But say what you want about him, Kendrick has built his entire career on authenticity. A move like this, if it's true, would completely go against everything he's represented as an artist. I mean, imagine Kendrick Lamar, of all artists, allowing people to engage in fraud activities on his behalf and risking his entire brand. You ask me, I don't see that as a reality at all. However, and this is another thing, I do see moves being made to push Not Like Us that fall into a gray area between marketing and outright fraud without Kendrick or his internal team's knowledge. Let's put it like this. Both Drake and Kendrick benefit from what we call the machine. And the machine essentially just being the music industry, but particularly all the people, the corporations, and all the moving parts that are set in place in order for artists like Drake and Kendrick to keep on thriving, because they're not doing all this by themselves. We know that. For that machine to keep running, it has to do what it does. But where does the fuel come from? A lot of times it comes from places that aren't directly authentic. Sometimes, figuratively speaking, it's stolen, or at least it comes from a questionable source. Now, is that right there fraud? Well, that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about what happens when you're operating the level these guys are operating at. Because like I said, they're not doing any of this by themselves. They have entire departments on top of departments on top of divisions working their records, promoting their catalogs behind the scenes. And this is because the stakes are massive. And the moves that a lot of times get made on the behalf of these artists can get messy. I say that to say this, right? As fans, we have to take a step back and analyze this very carefully. Instead of getting too emotionally invested in the drama of these people that we don't really know, we should be asking, why is the music industry the way that it is? And let's really think about it, right? Why is one of the biggest artists in the world, who happens to be beefing with another one of the biggest artists in the world, now claiming that the numbers behind the song weren't even real? The most likely answer, if you ask me, is because the person taking the action, Drake, is trying to control the narrative. But the plot has already been lost, right? Because the guy lost the beef. But here's the thing, you're thinking too much in the moment. You're forgetting the bigger picture. Fast forward 10 years from this point when the headlines read, Drake and Kendrick Lamar beefed 10 years ago from this date. By then, 5-year-old Timmy, who's 15 years old a decade from now, is going to look up information about this iconic beef between two of the biggest rappers on the planet, and the first thing he's going to find, or one of the first few things he's going to find, is this story right here. Now that's a masterclass on how you control the narrative. I'm not saying that Drake is entirely lying, because I don't really know. None of us actually know the truth. That's why it's pointless to get too invested into what this actually means, right? We can discuss it, but let's not get too invested into it. What I'm saying is Drake is being very tactful, because that's the kind of guy he is. Whatever he's doing, he's smart enough to know that he's playing the long game. And whether the streams from Not Like Us were inflated or not, it's about attaching a certain narrative to the story in itself. Things in the music industry are always about perception anyway. Society in general, with social media being our main source for news, runs on perception. And I say that to say this, I don't think this is going to continue further than this. I could of course be wrong, but unless there's tangible proof that these accusations are real, that implicates the people who are being pointed at, like Kendrick and UMG, it can't really go forward from here. Now, did Kendrick cheat the game? That's the question being asked here. And honestly, it's an accusation that hasn't been proven right or wrong. If you ask me for my personal opinion, I'd say that Not Like Us was a fan-driven, culturally impactful record. For that reason, I'm going to go ahead and make up my mind and say that this is all at least on Kendrick's side. exactly what it looks like. The result of an artist delivering a record that hit home for millions of people. I don't see Kendrick knowingly participating in any shady practices to boost the song. His track record as an artist speaks for itself. I have no reason to doubt him. But then again, there is so much that we don't know. The music industry is a complex machine, if you will. And the reality is a lot happens behind the scenes that never makes it to the surface. Deals are made, strings are pulled, and decisions are executed without the artist's knowledge. So while I don't believe Kendrick himself cheated the game, it's not impossible that the machine around him might have done things to maximize the song's reach. And that's where the lines start to blur. And this brings us to the bigger picture. At its core, this situation isn't just about Drake and Kendrick. It's a reflection of the music industry as a whole. The power dynamics, the strategies, and the ethics that go into creating and promoting hits. Whether you're Team Drake or Team Kendrick, one thing's clear for sure. This story raises important questions about how much of what we see as success in the industry is real and how much is manufactured. At the end of the day, it's really hard to know what's real and what's fake because there's always an agenda at play. Stories like this always remind me of one thing as someone who's been doing this for a very long time, which is to always question the narratives that we're being fed and to look deeper at how the industry really operates. Whether it's Drake trying to actually control the narrative or UMG just doing what big labels do best. This is more than just about a lawsuit that's about to happen or a beef between two rappers. It's a window into the mechanics of how modern music gets promoted. Anyway, if you made it this far, do me a favor and like this video. And if you've never been here before, my name is Blacky Speaks. Nice to meet you. Subscribe if you're new here. Honestly, I'm very curious what you have to say about this particular topic because this is a really big story right now. Did Kendrick Lamar cheat the game like Drake is claiming? Or do you think Drake is full of it? I'm curious to hear what you have to say and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. I'm out.